At 60, I thought I had seen everything. Hollywood fame, personal tragedies, decades of searching for meaning in a world that often feels empty. But 3 weeks ago, something shifted in my soul that I can't ignore anymore. I was sitting in my garden at dawn, coffee growing cold in my hands, when a simple question hit me like lightning. What if the peace I've been searching for my entire life isn't found in achievements, but in surrender? For years, I've walked alongside grief, loss, and the weight of questions that seem to have no answers. My sister's battle with leukemia, River's death, the pain that follows you like a shadow, whispering that maybe this is all their island. But that morning, staring at the first light breaking through the trees, I realized something profound. What if our deepest pain isn't meant to destroy us, but to prepare us for something greater? You see, at our age, we've learned that life doesn't follow the scripts we write. Dreams crumble, bodies betray us, people we love leave too soon. And in those dark moments, we're faced with a choice that determines everything. Do we become bitter or do we become open? I've spent decades studying philosophy, meditation, different spiritual paths, but none of them filled the emptiness until I started asking different questions. Not why me, but what is this trying to teach me? Here's what I discovered. Every season of suffering was actually preparing my heart for something I couldn't see coming. The loneliness taught me compassion. The loss taught me what truly matters. The questions taught me humility. And humility, I've learned, is the doorway to everything we've been searching for. Think about it. At this stage of life, what do we really need to prove anymore? What masks do we still need to wear? The freedom that comes with age isn't just about retirement or grandchildren. It's about finally being honest about the deepest longings of our souls. For me, that honesty led to a conversation with God that changed everything. Not the distant, judgmental deity I feared as a child, but the loving presence that had been waiting patiently through every wrong turn, every loss, every moment I thought I was alone. The peace I found wasn't about having all the answers. It was about finally being willing to trust the one who does. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. What if this season of your life, with all its aches and uncertainties, isn't the end of your story, but the beginning of the most meaningful chapter you've ever lived? What if every tear you've cried has been preparing your heart for a joy you can't even imagine yet? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share might just transform how you see everything that's ahead of you. Last month, I met an 82-year-old woman named Helen at a coffee shop in Santa Monica. She was sitting alone, staring out the window with the kind of emptiness I recognized immediately. The same look I've carried for years without realizing it. We started talking, and she told me something that stopped me cold. I've been waiting my whole life for permission to be happy. Permission. From who? Her late husband who criticized her dreams? Her children who live their own lives? Society that tells us seniors should just fade quietly into the background? That conversation haunted me because I saw myself in Helen's words. How many of us are living in invisible prisons we built ourselves? Here's the brutal truth nobody talks about. The biggest trap at our age isn't our failing bodies or shrinking bank accounts. It's believing the lie that our best days are behind us. I've watched friends surrender to this lie. They stop dreaming, stop growing, stop believing God has any plans left for them. They become passengers in their own lives, waiting for the ride to end. But what if that's exactly backwards? What if this season, when the world expects less from us, is actually when we're most free to become who we were always meant to be? Think about Moses. God called him at 80 to lead an entire nation out of slavery. Abraham became a father of nations at 100. Grandma Moses didn't start painting until she was 78 and became one of America's most celebrated artists. The pattern is clear. Sometimes our greatest purpose emerges not despite our age, but because of it. See, when you're young, you're driven by what others expect. You chase careers, build reputations, accumulate things. But age strips away the noise. It reveals what actually matters. And what matters isn't what you've lost. It's what you've gained. It's wisdom, perspective, the freedom to stop pretending. I've spent decades playing roles, wearing masks, trying to be what Hollywood wanted. But sitting in that garden 3 weeks ago, I realized something profound. The person I am when nobody's watching, that's who God has been waiting to use. Your scars aren't disqualifications, they're credentials. Every battle you've survived, every loss you've endured, every mistake you've learned from, these aren't reasons to hide. They're reasons to step forward with confidence. The enemy of our souls wants us to believe we're too old, too broken, too tired to matter anymore. But here's what I've discovered. That voice is lying. You think your arthritis disqualifies you from serving? Tell that to the grandmother whose gentle touch brings healing to broken hearts. You think your limited mobility means you're useless? Tell that to the grandfather whose prayers move mountains from his kitchen table. God doesn't need your strength. He needs your surrender. And surrender, I've learned, gets easier with age because we finally understand how little control we ever really had. But there's something else holding us back, something more dangerous than physical limitations or past regrets. It's the spiritual sleepwalking that convinces us this is all their island. What happens when we mistake existence for living? When we trade adventure for safety, purpose for comfort? That's when our souls start dying while our bodies are still breathing. I see it everywhere. People going through the motions, marking time, waiting for something to change without ever changing anything themselves. The question that keeps me awake at night is this: how many of us will reach our final days and realize we spent our golden years hiding our light instead of letting it shine? I want to share something that might disturb you. It's about the 3 lies that keep seniors trapped in spiritual mediocrity, and why breaking free from them could be the most important thing you ever do. The first lie nearly destroyed my friend Marcus. At 73, this brilliant former engineer told me, "God's finished with me. I'm just waiting to die." Marcus had built bridges that thousands of people crossed daily. He'd raised 4 successful children. He'd been married to his soulmate for 51 years. But cancer took his wife, arthritis took his mobility, and somewhere along the way, he let the first deadly lie take his hope. The lie whispers, "Your usefulness has expired." I looked Marcus in the eye and said something that shocked us both. What if God saved the best assignment of your life for right now? See, we've been programmed to think value equals productivity. But God's economy works differently. He doesn't measure your worth by your output. He measures it by your availability. Moses had a speech impediment and killed a man. David was an adulterer and murderer. Paul persecuted Christians before becoming one. God's resume requirements aren't what you'd expect. Your past mistakes, God calls them qualifications. Your current limitations, He calls them opportunities for His strength to shine through. The second lie is even more insidious. It targets the very core of our identity. Sarah, a 8-year-old retired teacher, confessed this to me. I feel invisible, like I don't matter anymore. The lie whispers, "You're irrelevant now." But here's what Sarah didn't realize. Invisibility to the world often means maximum visibility to God. When society stops paying attention, that's when heaven starts paying the most attention. Think about it. Jesus chose fishermen, not philosophers, tax collectors, not celebrities, the overlooked, the underestimated, the invisible, these are God's specialty. At our age, we're invisible to advertisers, irrelevant to employers, forgotten by a youth-obsessed culture. But that's not disqualification. That's liberation. When you stop trying to impress the world, you become available for God to use in ways that will amaze you. Sarah discovered this when she started volunteering at a crisis pregnancy center. Those young mothers didn't see an invisible old woman. They saw wisdom with wrinkles, hope with gray hair. They saw exactly what they needed. The third lie is the most dangerous because it disguises itself as humility. My neighbor, Robert, 79, says it this way: I'm too old to start anything new. I should just stay quiet and not be a burden. The lie whispers, you should shrink back and fade away. This isn't humility, it's spiritual suicide. God didn't give you decades of experience so you could hide in the corner. He didn't allow you to survive every storm in your life so you could whisper your final years away. The world needs your voice precisely because it's aged by experience. Your words carry weight that no young person's can. Your prayers have power that comes only from walking through fire and finding God faithful. But here's where it gets personal. These lies don't just steal your purpose, they rob God of the glory He planned to receive through your life. Every time you say, I'm too old, you're telling God He made a mistake in keeping you here. Every time you say, I'm useless, you're calling His plans for you meaningless. Every time you say, I should just fade away, you're rejecting the very purpose for which you draw breath. I've been guilty of believing all three lies. There were years when I thought my best work was behind me, when I felt irrelevant in a changing world, when I wanted to just disappear from the spotlight. But God had other plans. The deeper my pain went, the more authentic my performance became, the more invisible I felt, the more people seemed to connect with my humanity. The more I wanted to quit, the more He opened doors I never expected. What if the same is true for you? What if every limitation you're facing is actually positioning you for a breakthrough you can't see coming? What if your greatest ministry, your deepest impact, your most meaningful contribution to God's kingdom is still ahead of you? The question isn't whether you're too old, too broken, or too invisible. The question is, are you willing to let God prove these lies wrong through your life? Meet Dorothy, age 84. 5 years ago, everyone thought she was finished, widowed, living alone, struggling with diabetes and depression. Her own children suggested assisted living. But Dorothy heard something different in her morning prayers. Your story isn't over. Against all advice, she started a grief support group in her tiny apartment. Word spread. That group became a ministry reaching 200 families across 3 counties. Dorothy now speaks at conferences, councils, pastors, and just published her first book. At 84, she told me, I thought my purpose died with my husband. Turns out it was just being born. Then there's Frank, 91. Former factory worker, 8th grade education, hands crippled by arthritis. He felt worthless until his granddaughter asked him to pray for her troubled marriage. That prayer changed everything. Frank discovered he had a gift for intercession that shook heaven. Now he leads a prayer ministry that's seen dozens of marriages restored, addictions broken, and miracles documented. Frank can barely hold a pen, but his prayers move mountains. And there's Elena, 79, who survived the Holocaust as a child. For decades, she buried those memories, thinking they were too painful to share. But at 75, she felt God whisper, tell your story. Elena now speaks to thousands annually, showing how God's faithfulness endures even through humanity's darkest hours. Her testimony has prevented countless people from losing faith during their own trials. These aren't exceptional people. They're ordinary seniors who refuse to believe the lies. Dorothy could have stayed bitter. Frank could have stayed quiet. Elena could have stayed hidden. Instead, they chose to trust that God wasn't finished with them. And here's what they discovered. Your greatest assignment often comes disguised as your deepest wound. Dorothy's grief became her gift to others walking the same path. Frank's physical limitations drove him to spiritual power. Elena's trauma became testimony that transforms lives. What wound are you carrying that could become your ministry? What pain could become your platform? What limitation could become your launching pad? The enemy wants you to hide your scars. God wants to use them as credentials. So here's my question for you. If Dorothy, Frank, and Elena can discover their greatest purpose after 75, what's possible for your life right now? I want to share the simple prayer that changed everything for me and how it could unlock the door to the most meaningful chapter of your life. 3 weeks ago, sitting in my garden as dawn broke, I prayed the most dangerous prayer of my life. 3 simple words that terrified and liberated me simultaneously. Use me, Lord. Not bless me, not help me, not heal me. Just use me. It sounds simple, but those words carry revolutionary power. They shift everything from what you want God to do for you to what God wants to do through you. I'd been carrying this prayer in my heart for months, afraid to say it out loud, because I knew once I did, everything would change. God doesn't take that invitation lightly. Within hours, opportunities started appearing. A young actor struggling with addiction reached out. A director facing family crisis called unexpectedly. A script arrived that dealt with themes of redemption I'd never tackled before. Coincidence? I don't think so. Here's what I've learned. God is always working around us, but he's waiting for us to join him. That prayer, use me, Lord, is your application to participate in something bigger than yourself. But it requires courage, because when you tell God to use you, he might not use you the way you expect. Maybe you expected him to use your business experience, but he wants to use your heartbreak. Maybe you thought he'd use your education, but he wants to use your failure. Maybe you assumed he'd use your strengths, but he wants to use your surrender. The beautiful thing about this prayer at our age is we have less to lose and more to give. We're not worried about building careers or impressing peers. We can afford to be bold. I challenge you to pray it right now, out loud. Use me, Lord. Did you feel that shift, that mixture of fear and excitement? That's your spirit recognizing its true purpose. But here's the warning. This prayer will ruin your comfortable retirement. It will disturb your quiet routine. It will challenge your plans to fade peacefully into the background. And it will give you the most meaningful, joy-filled years of your entire life. One more truth before I leave you with this challenge. God doesn't need your permission to love you, but he does need your permission to use you. The question isn't whether you're qualified. The question is whether you're available. Your obituary hasn't been written yet. That means God isn't finished with your story. Every morning you wake up is God saying, I still have plans for you. Every breath you take is heaven declaring your purpose lives. The world may have labeled you senior, elderly, or retired, but God calls you chosen, equipped, and ready. At 60, I thought I knew how my story would end. Quiet fade, peaceful exit, maybe a few more movies. But God had other plans. He's using my platform in ways I never imagined to speak truth, offer hope, point people towards something greater than Hollywood dreams. If he can redirect my story at this stage, he can transform yours too. So here's my challenge. Stop asking God to bless your plans and start asking how you can join his. Stop waiting for permission from others and start listening for direction from above. Stop believing your best days are behind you and start preparing for the breakthrough ahead. The same God who parted seas, moved mountains, and raised the dead is inviting you into partnership, not because you're perfect, but because you're willing. Your age isn't disqualification, it's preparation. Your experience isn't baggage, it's equipment. Your scars aren't shame, they're strength. The adventure isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. What will you do with this truth?